Welcome to BHS 2520, Leadership Principles of Development. My name is Peter Wolf, and I'll be guiding you through this online class. To begin, I want to give you some introduction about myself and to the class, and tell you a bit about where we're headed and what's expected. So first, I've taught this class for several years, and I just recently spent several months updating and modifying the class. I think the updated version is much better than the old version, but I'm open to feedback, so please feel free to give me your thoughts about your experience as we go through the class. My interest in the topic of leadership began when I was in college. Prior to college, I don't think I gave much thought to leadership. I think in my mind there were leaders and there were followers, and I certainly was not a leader. I'm naturally introverted, and I was pretty shy in high school. As I said, that changed when I was in college. I attended Grace, and during my time as a student became very involved with student leadership. But I think I still associate leadership with extroverted, outgoing, popular, take charge kind of people. However, I had two mentors who loved talking about leadership as a skill and as a behavior and as a mindset. They began to introduce me to different theories and books and authors and ideas on leadership. And I began to study the concept of leadership for myself and realized that leadership wasn't some mystical gift that some had and others did not. It was actually a set of choices. It wasn't just about what I did, it was also about who I was. I could connect with my passions and my gifts and my skills in leadership, even if those were not the passions, gifts, and skills of someone that I might consider to be a natural leader. When I graduated college, I taught high school social studies in a small Christian school, which allowed me the freedom to develop my own elective class. So I put together a class on leadership. I really didn't like most things about teaching high school, but I did find that I loved teaching certain classes, and leadership was one of those classes. The final project for the students was for them to put on their own leadership conference for area high school students. It was a fantastic experience, and they did a great job with it. When I began my master's program, I wanted to learn about mentoring, discipleship, and leadership. So I completed an MA in spiritual formation and leadership. I think taking classes in spiritual formation and leadership in the same program really solidified for me the idea that good leadership comes from the soul of a person. It isn't just about a person's skills. It's truly about their character and who they are on the inside. That what a person believes matters to how they will live and lead. So after a few years of teaching, I went back to Grace and began working in the student affairs field. First, supervising residence halls, and then working as an associate dean. I was highly involved with student leadership training, and for 5 years taught a class that was a prerequisite for campus leaders. Some of that material that we developed for that class will be shared in this course. In that time, I developed other courses on leadership, specifically for the Masters in Higher Ed program that they have, and generally had a role in mentoring staff in their leadership with students. My time at Grace introduced me to a lot of different ideas about leadership. Unfortunately, some of them are outside the scope of this class, but are in the textbook, like organizational leadership or team-based leadership. I've since left my role as Associate Dean at Grace in order to return to school, this time in the field of pastoral counseling. I've realized that my personal desire is to lead individuals towards wholeness and holiness through individual or group mentoring or counseling. I know that I'll continue to read about, study, and practice leadership in the various areas of my life, and I'm thrilled that I can continue to teach this course. All of that to say, I think leadership is an important topic, and I've dedicated quite a bit of time to the study and practice of leadership. I am by no means an expert, and I look forward to us learning about leadership together. But I love being able to teach this class, and I'm really glad you're part of it. As I think about leadership, and the multiple approaches that one could take to lead, and to study leadership, I think it'd be a good idea for me to share some of my thoughts concerning the way we lead and the way we study leadership before our class even begins. First of all, within this class, and anytime you're studying anything, it's important to have a common definition. Definitions tend to restrict. They say what something is and also what it isn't. Descriptions tend to expand. They open up to how something could be. In this class, we have to both define and describe leadership. To be honest, I've never had a really great definition of leadership. In all the books I've read and all the authors I've read and the speakers I've heard, I've never really come away with a great, this is it, this is my definition of leadership. Your textbook is going to help you understand why. So for the sake of this class, we'll just go with the textbook's definition. But I do want to offer some thoughts and some critiques about it. Peter Northouse, the author of this textbook, defines leadership as a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. Not a bad definition. I do appreciate how the author breaks it down and explains why he chose the words he did, but I've got some thoughts about that. First, for the purposes of this class, leadership can also be with individuals. It's not just with groups. I don't think it's just about one person getting a group of people to do something. I think mentoring is a form of leadership, discipleship is a form of leadership, so for our purposes, we're not going to be limited to just groups. Secondly, once you read the first chapter, you'll understand, but again for our purposes, leadership and management are pretty much the same thing. We're not going to get into the nuanced differences between the two. I think there is a difference, but if you're really interested to know about that difference, read a book called The One Thing You Need to Know by Marcus Buckingham. Other than that, not important for this class. Third, the first chapter talks about types of power. Power can take many forms, and positional power, the power that you get simply from having a title, isn't always bad, though often our generation tends to prefer personal power, the relational power that we have with other individuals. So we're going to talk about types of power in this class. Not all power is bad. Fourth, some of the approaches to leadership that we're going to talk about will be clearly in line with biblical values and a biblical worldview. It may not be obvious with some of the others. Some of you may wonder why we don't explicitly cover spiritual leadership in this class. Well, mostly because it's outside the scope of this class. There's so much we could talk about. But I will also say that if you're a Christ follower and the Holy Spirit lives in you, then everything you do could be considered worship and therefore spiritual. We're not necessarily going to look at biblical examples of leadership in this class, but I want us to always examine these approaches with a biblical worldview. That requires critical thinking and a willingness to set aside some of our preconceived notions about what leadership is and isn't. Leadership is complex and it's multidimensional. This will be quickly evident as we look at all the different theories. In the first week, you're going to need to read a handout called Leadership Theories, Models, and Approaches. This is a brief overview of all the theories, models, and approaches that we're going to be looking at in this class. The first lecture, video lecture, is going to talk more about the multidimensional nature of leadership. As I just said, we're going to take a look at many different leadership theories. Theories are kind of complex. They're both descriptive and prescriptive. By descriptive, I mean that some theories explain how and why things actually are. By prescriptive, I mean that some theories explain how things should be. They prescribe a course of action. In this class, we're going to take a look at both types of theories. I think it's helpful to understand that some leadership theories are really more prescriptive. They say how it should or could be rather than how things always are. Now, most of these theories that we're going to look at are actually interrelated with each other, but in order to be really understood, you sort of have to isolate them to understand them. In some senses, all of the theories are right sometimes, or all of the time, or at different times, but that's confusing to think about. So instead, we isolate them one at a time and focus on them when they're most descriptive and most observable of what's actually taking place. One way I've started to think about theories is that they can act as lenses. If you wear glasses or bifocals or transition lenses or something like that, then you're familiar with the idea that when looking through a lens, some things are going to be sharp and in focus and other things are going to be a little bit blurry. Some lenses magnify. Some lenses, like sunglasses, might cause things to have a certain distortion or color to them. And leadership theories are kind of like that. They bring certain things into theory or into focus and really magnify those aspects of leadership, and they blur or diminish other aspects of leadership. We all have a lens through which we're looking at leadership. We just may or may not be aware of it. And one of the purposes of this class is to help you be aware of what lens are you using when you look at leadership, when you think about leadership. What do you tend to magnify and what do you tend to diminish? As we look through these different theories and models, think about that. Alright, some final thoughts about leadership before I get into the details of the class. Leadership is hard to measure, which is why we rely on a set of behaviors. But theories disagree as to which set of behaviors. Most of the class we're going to be looking at behavioral theories, but please remember what I said earlier. Leadership isn't only about what you do. It's also about who you are. But it's also not just about who you are. It's also about what you do. You have to be able to bring both of those things together. And leadership is both an art and a science. Art requires practice and reflection, and hopefully in this class we'll get to do both. Alright, enough rambling thoughts about theories and descriptions and definitions. Here's the actual details about the class. I've taken a number of online classes. Some have been great, some have been absolutely dreadful. Some have been really clear, and others have been really vague and confusing. I hope that I've learned enough to make this class as clear as possible. I don't want there to be any doubt as to what is due or when it is due. To help with that, I found that online classes need to have a predictable weekly rhythm. Otherwise, it's too easy to forget about them and then feel rushed or behind. So, I do my best to set up assignments and due dates to help create a rhythm. Here's what you can expect in this class. Under each week's subheading on the class website, you'll see the week's reading, which is also listed in the syllabus. A link to the video lecture, a link to the quiz, an area for supplemental resources, a discussion board link, a place to type a short journal entry, and an area to either upload a case study or a short paper. The supplemental resources aren't required reading or watching. Some are videos and some are just audio files. However, they fit with the week's topics, and they might provide you with some material for the discussion board, or just for your own personal interest. The first thing you'll need to complete each week is the reading. With the exception of one week, which I can't remember which one, and it's pretty clear which one, you have to watch the video first. The reading will vary between 1 and 3 chapters of the textbook. After you do the reading, then watch the video lecture. The video lecture will further explain the reading, or provide more examples, or give an alternate perspective to the reading. Or, as in the case of the first week, it might present some information that I think is pretty valuable, but the text doesn't cover it, or we don't have time to go into it elsewhere. So, first, complete the reading. Second, watch the video lecture. Third, take the quiz. The quiz will cover information from the reading and from the video lectures. While most of the quiz questions will be general recall questions, I really like application questions because they actually require you to understand and apply a concept. Most questions will be multiple choice, and most of the quizzes will be 20 questions or less depending on the number of chapters assigned for the week. Week 3 has 3 chapters of reading, so it's a longer quiz. The quizzes are open note and open book, but they are timed. For those of you who live in the same area, it's expected that you don't work together on the quizzes. For each quiz, you'll have 30 minutes to complete it. Please complete the quiz by Wednesdays at midnight. Also by Wednesday at midnight, post to the discussion board. This will be your initial post. This initial post will be a thoughtful and supported response to the question that's posed to you. You must have support, either from the text, or from the lecture, or from any of the supplemental materials, or even outside sources. This is where the supplemental resources come in. You might find something helpful in those resources that support your particular view. If you quote something directly, be sure to use proper citation. I imagine most of you are familiar with the MLA format of in-text citation, which works just fine. For those of you who aren't, just end the quote or whatever it is that you've cited with parentheses, and in the parentheses have the author's name and then the page number. If you're citing the video, you don't need a page number, of course, just have my name, unless I say this author said this, and then maybe put that author's name in there. If it's the North House textbook or the video you're citing, that's all you need. If you're citing some other source, one of the supplemental sources, just be sure you're very clear as to what source that is. Your grade for the discussion board is based on meeting the requirements listed in the syllabus, and this includes 1. Fully answering the question posted, 2. Meeting the minimum word requirement, and 3. Supporting your thoughts with cited sources. All 3 of those are pretty important. I tend to start everyone with a sort of 90-95% on each discussion board, and then you can either go down from there or go higher from there. You have to really impress me to get full credit on a discussion board. And to do that, you generally have to cite multiple sources. So for those overachievers and you want to get a full 20 out of 20 on every discussion board, cite multiple sources, be very thorough, be very thoughtful, and don't forget about nuanced ways to approach the question or to the prompt that's posed. Again, this initial post is due Wednesday by midnight. So by Wednesday, take the quiz and do the initial discussion post. By Friday, I want you to think a little bit about how what we're discussing applies to you personally. We're going to talk a lot about theory in this class, as I've said. If it's not practical, you're never going to remember it or use any of it in the future. So I'd like you to take some time to journal. This won't be a journal that you need to pour out your deepest secrets and longings, but I would like you to get personal, whatever that means to you. Yes, you're doing this for a grade, but I think most learning comes when we take time to intentionally reflect about what we're studying, and journaling is just one way to do that. So, watch the video, take the quiz, do the discussion board, and submit your journal entry. The next thing that I think helps increase learning is when we interact with others about our ideas. Since we can't do that in person in a classroom, I want you to interact with at least 2 other discussion posts online. But don't just say, yes, I agree, or no, I disagree. Why do you agree? Why do you disagree? What else could you add that might support their position? Or what do you have that would be a good counter-argument that disagrees with their position? Your responses need to be thoughtful. You're engaging in a conversation with a person, a fellow classmate, not just writing something and sending it out into cyberspace. So, respond in a way that creates discussion. Even ask clarifying questions if you need to. If someone asks you a question, you need to respond. That's good classroom etiquette. It's what we would do if we were in a real classroom together. Remember, the discussion board is attempting to replace an in-person conversation in a classroom. So try to have the same mindset as if you were in the classroom with someone. However, in a classroom, conversation, flow of thought, spelling, that's not really important because if you misspeak, you can immediately catch yourself or correct yourself. But we can't do that online. So it's very important that you proofread anything you post. We can't ask you to clarify in real time, so it needs to be clear the first time. I'd like you to finish up all the interactions and discussions by Friday at midnight. So do your initial post on Wednesday, and then check back on Thursday and Friday throughout the day to see who has responded to you and make your responses to other people. Finally, each week, you'll either have a case study or a short paper. For week 1 and week 8, it's a short paper. And when I say short, it's 2 to 4 pages. The purpose of the case studies and papers are application of theory or deeper look at a specific idea. Again, I want what we're discussing to be practical. The more ways we can find to apply the concepts, the more they stick. The case studies and papers are due Saturday by noon. Everything else is due by midnight, but I want these Saturday by noon. The reason it's noon is because I tend to grade them Saturday afternoon. I don't want them due Saturday at midnight because I don't want to do any work on Sunday. I think we both need a break after the end of a long week. It's also the reason I'm not going to open up the following week until Monday. We need a day off. We need to have at least one day where we don't do any work. The only exception to that is the final week. I will open that up a little bit early. And that, it's just to help us to wrap up well and get everything done by the end of the course so that I can submit grades. There is one other assignment that is not part of the weekly rhythm of this course. By the end of the 8 weeks, I want you to choose one of the following options. These options may not really seem like they fit in a class about leadership, but the more I've watched leaders, studied leaders, and examined my own life, the more I realize the necessity of both of these disciplines. The first option is this: take 4 hours and be alone with God. You can have a Bible and a journal if you must, but this isn't meant to be 4 hours of Bible study. This is meant to be 4 hours of quiet solitude, when you disconnect from everything that screams for your attention. No computer, no phone, no music, no electronics of any kind, just you and God for 4 hours straight. And don't use the excuse that your Bible is on your phone. Find a real, actual paper Bible. Otherwise, you're just going to be distracted. I recently heard about a study where college students were asked to sit still for 15 minutes. They couldn't do anything during that time, and they were told to move as little as possible. The following day, they were invited back and given the option of either sitting for 15 minutes or receiving a mild electrical shock. Most people chose to get shocked. Sitting still for 15 minutes is apparently more painful. Now, your second choice is a little bit better than getting shocked. Your second option is to choose a book that is at least 120 pages long and read it over the course of the 8 weeks. This book is to be about anything that is personally or spiritually enriching to you. I don't care what it is. It could be a book about a subject that you find fascinating but never have time to read about. It could be a book that everybody keeps talking about but you haven't made time to read yet. It could be fiction or not fiction, but it has to be something that can help you grow as a person. At the end of the session, All you have to do is tell me whether or not you did either one of those two things. No paper, no summary, no evaluation, it's all or nothing. And if you choose to skip it altogether, it's only 5% of your final grade. Alright, I've told you about me, and I've told you about the class. I would like for you to introduce yourself to me and to the class. Under where the syllabus is posted, there is a discussion forum called Introductions. First, write a paragraph or two telling us about yourself. Second, let me know what, if any, questions about the syllabus you may have. If you have no questions, please let me know that you've read the syllabus, understand it, and have no questions. If you feel like your question's pretty specific, like you're going to be gone for a portion of the next 8 weeks, send me an email. I promise to get back to you as soon as I can. I check my email all the time, but if you're working at 3 a.m., don't expect a quick response. Otherwise, I'll see what I can do. Alright, those are my introductory thoughts, vague and rambling as they may be. I look forward to learning more about leadership with you as we go through this class together. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, and I'll see you on the discussion boards.